My name is Alexandra Carter, and I am 35 years old. I built a $50 million tech company from nothing, only to wake up from a 6-month coma and discover my sister Margaret had taken over everything. When I walked into my office, she just laughed. "You snooze, you lose," she said with a smirk. I smiled back calmly and replied, "Check the safe." She had absolutely no idea what I was hiding. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever been betrayed by someone close to you. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I outsmarted my sister who thought she had stolen my entire life while I was fighting for mine. Growing up, Margaret was always the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she had this magnetic charm that drew people in effortlessly. Where I was calculated and methodical, Margaret was spontaneous and vibrant. Our parents adored her endless stream of friends, her participation in every school play, and her natural ability to become the center of attention wherever she went. I was different. While Margaret collected admirers, I collected computer parts. By 15, I was spending weekends taking apart old laptops and rebuilding them with modifications. Our father worked as an IT manager for a local bank and would bring home outdated equipment they were discarding. Most kids got clothes as hand-me-downs. I got motherboards and processors. When Margaret struggled with math homework, I would help her. When I needed someone to present my science fair project because public speaking made me anxious, she would step in. We were different, but complementary. At least, that was what I believed for many years. College separated us physically but highlighted our differences even more starkly. I pursued computer science at MIT, working part-time coding jobs to help pay tuition. Margaret attended UCLA for marketing, calling home regularly about sorority events and industry connections she was making. Our parents remortgaged their house to cover her expenses when she claimed the networking opportunities were too valuable to miss. After graduation, I turned down lucrative job offers from tech giants. I had bigger plans. With $20,000 saved from my coding jobs and a small loan from our parents, I started working on my own cybersecurity startup, SecureLink. The timing seemed perfect with data breaches making headlines almost weekly. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked out of my studio apartment, surviving on ramen and coffee while coding 18-hour days. 3 different investor groups turned me down. 2 potential business partners walked away after initial meetings. Margaret occasionally called, usually when she needed money to cover rent between jobs. My breakthrough came during a sleepless 48-hour coding marathon. I developed an encryption algorithm that could protect data during transfer in a way existing solutions couldn't. It was elegant, efficient, and unlike anything on the market. I filed for a patent immediately. Northeast Financial, a regional bank with national ambitions, became my first major client after their security officer recognized the potential of my technology. Their $50,000 contract allowed me to rent a small office space and hire 2 junior developers. Within 6 months, we added 3 more financial institutions as clients. During this period, Margaret lost another job in marketing. She showed up at my tiny office unannounced, commenting on how modest everything looked, but saying she could help with branding. Against my better judgment, I created a position for her handling our minimal marketing needs. She lasted 4 months before leaving for a fashion startup that offered a more glamorous environment. SecureLink grew steadily over the next 7 years. My core technology evolved into a comprehensive security platform that became the gold standard for financial institutions. We expanded to 60 employees, moved into sleek downtown offices, and reached the coveted $50 million valuation after our latest funding round. Throughout this growth, my personal life remained practically non-existent. I dated occasionally, but relationships always took a back seat to the company. My apartment, just 3 blocks from the office, was barely furnished despite my growing wealth. I knew the names of the night janitors better than my neighbors. SecureLink wasn't just my company. It was my identity, my achievement, my life. Margaret floated between marketing positions at various companies, never staying anywhere longer than 18 months. She would call me with grand ideas for businesses she wanted to start, always needing just a small investment to get going. Sometimes I gave her money, knowing I would never see a return. Other times I offered her temporary project work at SecureLink when she was between jobs. Looking back, I should have recognized the pattern. Margaret always saw my success as a resource she could tap into rather than something she needed to build for herself. The signs were there in how she talked about my company as our family business when it suited her narrative with friends, despite her minimal contributions. The board of directors urged me to improve our work-life balance as the company grew. They worried about burnout, about the company being too dependent on me. I nodded in meetings and promised changes that never materialized. SecureLink was my creation, my code, my vision. Nobody could run it like I could. Or so I thought. Until life forced me to learn otherwise in the most painful way possible. I remember that night with uncomfortable clarity. It was a Tuesday in November. Rain pounding against the windows of my corner office. The development team had left hours earlier after we finished implementing a major security update for our banking clients. I stayed behind, tweaking code segments that were already functional but could be more elegant. By 11:30 at night, I had been awake for 36 hours straight, sustained by black coffee and the singular focus that had built my company. My eyes burned from staring at screens. But I felt that familiar rush of solving complex problems that had become my primary source of joy. The office phone rang. It was our Australian client calling about an integration issue. By the time I finished troubleshooting with their team, it was past 1 in the morning. The rain had intensified into a proper storm. I should have called a rideshare, but in my exhaustion, driving the 10 minutes to my apartment seemed simpler. That decision changed everything. I remember the slick roads, the glare of headlights through rain-streaked windows. I remember adjusting the heater and thinking about the code I would refine tomorrow. I do not remember the truck that ran the red light at 60 miles per hour, slamming into the driver's side of my car and sending it spinning across 3 lanes. The paramedics told me later that a witness called 911 immediately. They extracted me from the crushed vehicle using hydraulic tools. My heart stopped twice in the ambulance. By all medical logic, I should have died that night. Instead, I slipped into a coma with multiple injuries. Broken ribs, punctured lung, internal bleeding, and the traumatic brain injury that kept me unconscious for the next 6 months. I existed in strange darkness, occasionally pierced by sound. Beeping machines, murmured medical consultations, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes. And voices. Voices that reached me through the darkness, although I couldn't respond. Margaret visited regularly according to the nurses. In my suspended state, I caught fragments of her conversations. With doctors about my prognosis, which remained uncertain week after week. With nurses about my care routines. With colleagues from SecureLink about ongoing projects. But it was the moments when she thought I couldn't hear that revealed the most. Sitting beside my hospital bed, her voice would drop to a whisper. I always hated how easy this all came to you, Alexandra. The brains, the success, the respect. You know how many jobs I have lost while you built your precious company? How many times I had to call mom and dad for money while they bragged to everyone about their brilliant older daughter. Other times, her tone would shift to something more calculating. Your team is lost without you. The board is panicking about leadership. They need someone who understands the company, someone with the Carter name. It should be me. It was always supposed to be us building something together, but you had to do everything yourself. Maybe this is fate giving me my turn. I wanted to scream, to sit up and confront her. But my body remained still, betraying nothing of the consciousness that flickered within me. The company leadership struggled in my absence. My executive team was brilliant at their specialized roles, but had always looked to me for final decisions. Our chief financial officer Patricia managed day-to-day operations initially. But strategic questions remained unanswered. 3 weeks after my accident, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Margaret attended as my next of kin. I learned about what happened through the hospital visits of Ryan Thompson, our chief technology officer and the person I trusted most after myself with SecureLink's core technology. The board reviewed temporary leadership options. They considered promoting Patricia, bringing in an interim CEO, or even preparing for acquisition offers that were already circling like vultures. Margaret presented herself as the solution. Though not technically qualified, she argued that she understood my vision better than anyone. She had the Carter name, knowledge of the company culture, and most importantly, she claimed to know what I would want. The board hesitated. Margaret had never demonstrated the technical knowledge or business acumen to run a cybersecurity company. But faced with uncertainty and Margaret's impressive pitch about preserving the family legacy of SecureLink, they agreed to a temporary arrangement. Margaret would become acting CEO, with Ryan and Patricia providing technical and financial oversight. As weeks turned to months, my medical situation remained precarious. The traumatic brain injury caused persistent swelling. Doctors tried various treatments with minimal improvement. They spoke in careful terms about the possibility I might never wake up or might wake with significant cognitive impairment. What they couldn't measure was my awareness, which came and went like radio signals through static. In those moments of clarity, trapped in my unresponsive body, I pieced together what was happening to the company I had sacrificed everything to build. And I began to understand the true nature of my sister in ways I had spent a lifetime avoiding. The transformation of SecureLink under Margaret's leadership was swift and comprehensive. Within days of the board granting her temporary control, she moved into my office. Ryan told me during his hospital visits that she replaced my minimalist decor with lavish furnishings, including an Italian leather executive chair that cost $5,000. Her first executive decision was firing Barbara, my loyal assistant of 6 years. Barbara had organized my chaotic schedule, managed difficult clients, and understood the technical aspects of our business well enough to prioritize truly urgent matters. Margaret replaced her with Jessica, a former sorority sister with no technical background but an impressive collection of designer handbags. When key staff members questioned these changes, Margaret branded them as resistant to necessary evolution. Those who pushed back too firmly found themselves marginalized or managed out. The company culture I had built around innovation and technical excellence began shifting toward image and marketing. Margaret called an all-hands meeting during her second week. According to Ryan, she stood confidently at the front of our main conference room, dressed in a power suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Alexandra built an impressive security company, she told the assembled staff. But the market is changing. Security alone is not enough to grow. We need products that are more accessible, more marketable, more relevant to the average business. SecureLink will become a full-service technology provider, not just a security specialist. This fundamental shift in direction alarmed the development team. Our reputation and value were built on specialized security expertise. Our encryption technology was best in class precisely because we focused exclusively on doing one thing better than anyone else. Margaret dismissed these concerns. Ryan tried to explain the technical implications of diluting our focus, but she cut him off in front of the entire company. With all due respect, Ryan, my sister was brilliant at the technical side, but she missed massive market opportunities because she was too narrowly focused. The board has entrusted me to guide this company forward, not keep it frozen in amber while Alexandra is indisposed. The financial resources of SecureLink were now at Margaret's disposal, and she took full advantage. She renovated the executive floor, hired a PR firm to boost her personal profile alongside the company's, and began hosting lavish business networking events that had little to do with cybersecurity. When our quarterly results showed the first decline in 5 years, Margaret blamed market conditions and increased competition. She assured the board that her new direction would soon show results. They were growing concerned but remained committed to the arrangement, partly because there was still no certainty about my recovery. Ryan continued visiting me in the hospital, ostensibly to keep my family updated on company matters. In reality, he came to vent his frustrations and, though I couldn't respond, to maintain some connection to the founder who understood the technology at the heart of our business. She is using the development budget to fund a consumer app that has nothing to do with enterprise security, he told my unresponsive form one evening. When I questioned it, she said we need to diversify revenue streams. But Alexandra, she is gutting the core R&D team to chase this shiny object. The company's flagship encryption product, the innovation that had built our reputation, was receiving minimal updates. Key security researchers were reassigned to consumer projects or left the company altogether. Multiple clients expressed concerns about our changing focus, but Margaret assured them this was evolution, not abandonment. 6 months into her tenure, SecureLink had changed dramatically. Margaret had become comfortable in her role, enjoying the prestige and power that came with running a $50 million tech company. She gave interviews to business publications, accepted speaking engagements at conferences, and positioned herself as a visionary female tech leader. The reality within the company was less impressive. Product quality was declining. Staff turnover had doubled. The sales team struggled to meet targets with a confusing mix of legacy security products and new, unproven offerings. Financial reports showed concerning trends in cash flow and client retention. Margaret either didn't see or chose to ignore these warning signs. She was too busy enjoying her moment in the spotlight, the validation she had always craved. In her mind, she was finally proving she could do what I had done, perhaps even better. What she didn't know, what nobody except Ryan partially knew, was that I had anticipated something like this might happen. Not the accident, not the coma, but a challenge to my control of SecureLink. I had created safeguards, contingency plans, evidence collections, all safely stored where Margaret would never think to look. As my body slowly began to heal and my consciousness became more consistent, I wondered if those precautions would be enough to save what I had built when I finally woke up. If I woke up 1 year before my accident, I discovered something troubling. We were preparing for a new funding round, and during a routine review of shareholder agreements, our corporate lawyer Franklin Bennett flagged an irregularity. Margaret, who owned a small percentage of company shares from her brief employment period, had attempted to leverage her position as my sister to convince a board member to grant her proxy voting rights. When confronted, Margaret laughed it off as a misunderstanding. She claimed she was just trying to learn more about corporate governance. But the pattern was clear. Over the years, there had been small incidents, unauthorized access attempts to financial reports, questions to staff about decision-making processes, client meetings she attended without clear purpose. I had ignored these warning signs, making excuses for her behavior. She was curious. She was trying to learn. She was my sister. But after the proxy voting incident, I could no longer deny the truth. Margaret viewed my company as a potential resource to be acquired rather than my life's work to be respected. That realization led me to Franklin's office on a rainy Thursday afternoon. His corner office in the financial district featured antique law books and a view of the harbor. Franklin had been with me since SecureLink was just 3 people working out of a converted garage. He understood both the legal landscape and my personal concerns. Alexandra, have you considered creating a business continuity plan? He asked after hearing my concerns about Margaret. Not just for unexpected death, which standard succession plans cover, but for incapacitation or unauthorized takeover attempts. That meeting initiated what I came to call Project Safeguard. Over the next 2 months, Franklin and I created a comprehensive legal and technical framework to protect SecureLink from both external threats and internal betrayal. The first component was a special executive clause in the company bylaws. Buried in standard legal language was a provision that any acting CEO appointed during my incapacitation would have limited authority to make structural changes without supermajority board approval. The clause was subtle enough that someone without legal training would likely miss its significance. Next came the physical safe. Not the company safe in our secure server room, which Margaret knew about, but a personal safe installed in my downtown apartment behind a false wall in my home office. Inside this safe, I stored multiple layers of protection. First, There were printouts of emails and text messages from Margaret over the years, documenting her attempts to leverage my success and her occasional dishonesty in financial matters. Nothing individually damning, but collectively painting a clear picture of her character and intentions. Second, I included a USB drive containing recorded conversations. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, and I had always been careful to follow the law. These were recordings Margaret knew about and had consented to, usually during company events or meetings. But what she didn't realize was how her unguarded comments revealed her true feelings about SecureLink being a stepping stone rather than a mission. The third component was perhaps the most technically sophisticated. Working nights and weekends, I filed a secondary patent application under a shell corporation named Carter Innovations. This patent covered a crucial extension of our core encryption technology, one that would become essential for our next-generation products. The shell corporation was structured to automatically transfer all rights back to SecureLink under specific conditions, including my return from any prolonged absence. For additional protection, I established an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands to hold key intellectual property licenses. The trust had strict management conditions and would effectively freeze critical IP if unusual financial or operational changes were detected at SecureLink. Finally, I implemented what programmers call a dead man switch. If I failed to perform certain weekly authentication steps in our security system, a sequence of encrypted notifications would be sent to Franklin, Ryan, and two trusted board members. These notifications contained information about accessing the evidence and legal protections I had put in place. Ryan knew parts of this plan, but not all. As my chief technology officer, he understood the technical components and the need to protect our core innovation. But I kept the full extent of my concerns about Margaret private. Despite everything, she was still my sister. And publicly documenting my distrust felt like crossing a final line I wasn't ready to cross. The weight of these preparations took an emotional toll. Each night, after implementing another layer of protection, I would sit in my Spartan apartment and question myself. Was I being paranoid? Was I letting isolated incidents color my perception of my own sister? Was my obsession with control pushing me to see threats where none existed? But then I would remember the look in Margaret's eyes when she talked about my success. Not pride, not admiration, but something closer to calculation. As if my achievements were puzzles she was trying to solve, not to replicate through her own work, but to acquire through some shortcut. I never wanted to use these protections. I created them as insurance, as a worst-case scenario plan that would likely stay locked away forever. I certainly never imagined that a random truck running a red light would trigger this elaborate system designed to preserve everything I had built. As I lay in my hospital bed, consciousness gradually returning in longer stretches, I thought about that hidden safe. About the evidence documenting years of small betrayals that had predicted this larger one. About the legal tripwires Margaret would trigger if she tried to permanently seize control of SecureLink. I just needed to wake up to activate the final pieces of the plan. My body needed to catch up with my increasingly alert mind. And based on the hospital conversations I was now fully processing, that moment was approaching faster than anyone, especially Margaret, expected. Consciousness returned gradually, like a tide creeping up a shoreline. First came increased awareness of sounds around me. The rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. Nurses chatting during shift changes. The squeak of the door hinge that needed oil. Then sensation. The slight roughness of hospital sheets. The cool flow of air conditioning. The dull ache throughout my body that indicated I was alive enough to feel pain. Finally, movement. A twitch of fingers that took monumental effort. Eyelids that felt sealed shut until one day. They weren't. The first face I saw was a nurse named Diane. I learned later she had cared for me throughout much of my 6-month absence from consciousness. Her eyes widened when mine opened, truly focused for the first time since the accident. "Alexandra? Can you hear me?" she asked, already reaching for the call button. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like I had swallowed glass. Months without use had left my vocal cords weak and raspy. I managed a small nod instead. The next hours passed in a blur of neurological examinations, cautious optimism from doctors, and the slow, frustrating process of relearning how to communicate. A whiteboard became my primary tool, my handwriting shaky but determined. "Where is Margaret?" I wrote on the second day after waking. "I called her yesterday," Diane explained. "She said she has an important investor meeting, but will visit this evening." The meeting never materialized. Neither did the evening visit. 3 days passed before Margaret appeared, dressed immaculately in a designer suit that I recognized as substantially more expensive than anything she could previously afford. "Look who is finally awake," she exclaimed, her voice too loud for the small hospital room. Her smile seemed genuine to the nurses, but I caught the calculation behind her eyes. She was assessing the situation, measuring my condition against her plans. "The doctors say it is a miracle," she continued, setting down a small bouquet of flowers. 6 months is a long time, Alexandra. So much has changed." I let her talk. About the company. About how lost everyone had been without me. About how she had stepped in to preserve my legacy. Her version of events painted her as the reluctant hero, the devoted sister who sacrificed her own plans to save what I had built. My physical weakness worked to my advantage. Margaret mistook my silence for confusion or gratitude. She had no way of knowing how much I had heard during my time in the darkness, or how clearly I now understood her true intentions. On the 5th day after waking, Ryan visited. Margaret had been limiting staff visits, citing medical concerns. But Ryan insisted as Chief Technology Officer that he needed to update me on critical security matters. The moment the door closed behind him, his professional demeanor cracked. "Thank God you are awake," he said, voice low despite our privacy. "The company is in trouble, Alexandra. Margaret has pivoted us away from our core security focus. The new consumer apps are burning through cash with minimal return. 3 enterprise clients have declined to renew their contracts." He filled me in on details I had already partially gathered from Margaret's conversations at my bedside. The development team was demoralized. Our market position was slipping. The board was growing concerned, but felt hamstrung by the temporary leadership arrangement and uncertainty about my recovery. "Is my personal laptop still in my office?" I wrote on the whiteboard. Ryan frowned. "Margaret cleaned out most of your things. Said she needed the space. But I saved your laptop and some personal items in my office safe." I nodded and wrote, "Bring it tomorrow. Say nothing to Margaret." The following day, Ryan returned with my laptop and charger hidden in his briefcase. He also brought my phone. Still functional after all these months thanks to the hospital staff occasionally charging it at Diane's insistence. When he left, I began the slow, painful process of catching up. My fingers felt clumsy on the keyboard, but muscle memory gradually returned. Using the hospital's Wi-Fi, I accessed hidden email accounts and monitoring systems I had established during Project Safeguard. The picture that emerged confirmed my worst fears. Margaret had gone far beyond temporary leadership. She had systematically restructured departments, redirected research priorities, and even begun preliminary talks with Axiom Tech, our largest competitor, about a potential merger that would effectively give them control of our core technology. Financial reports showed alarming patterns. Executive expenses had tripled. The marketing budget had ballooned while research and development funding shrank. Customer acquisition costs were rising while retention rates fell. The company that had taken me 10 years to build was being hollowed out in 6 months. Physical recovery became my obsession. I worked with therapists twice daily, pushing myself to rebuild strength faster than the medical team thought possible. I practiced speaking until my voice returned, still raspy but functional. I requested additional protein in my meals to rebuild muscle mass. During Margaret's increasingly infrequent visits, I played weaker than I was. I asked simple questions about the company, nodding at her vague, reassuring answers. I expressed gratitude for her stepping in, all while mentally cataloging each misrepresentation, each outright lie. My medical team was amazed by my cognitive recovery. Despite 6 months in a coma, my mental faculties returned almost completely intact. The brain scans showed healing that exceeded their expectations. Only my body needed time to catch up with my fully functioning mind. 3 weeks after waking, I was moved to a rehabilitation facility. There, I accelerated my recovery plan, working with physical therapists during scheduled sessions and continuing exercises alone at night. I made arrangements with Franklin, using a secure line from the rehabilitation center's administrative office when no one was around. "Is everything still in place?" I asked him during one such call. His response was immediate and reassuring. "Everything is exactly where you left it, Alexandra. The safe, the documents, the contingency measures. Do you want me to activate anything now?" "No," I replied. "I want to handle this personally. But be ready for my call. Things will move quickly once I return." 6 weeks after waking from the coma, against medical advice, but with legal clearance, I checked myself out of the rehabilitation facility. I was not fully recovered physically. I still walked with a slight limp and tired easily. But I was strong enough for what needed to be done. It was time to reclaim what was mine. I arrived at SecureLink headquarters unannounced on a Tuesday morning. The security guard at the front desk dropped his coffee mug when he saw me, liquid splattering across the polished marble floor. "Miss Carter," he exclaimed. "We had no idea you were. Welcome back." I smiled and asked for my access badge to be reactivated. Word of my arrival spread through the building like wildfire. As I made my way to the executive floor, employees emerged from offices and cubicles, expressions ranging from shock to delight. Many had genuine tears in their eyes. Alexandra, Patricia, our chief financial officer, was the first executive to reach me. Her professional demeanor cracked as she gave me a careful hug, mindful of my still recovering body. "We thought we might never see you back here." The company I walked through was subtly different from the one I had left. The core development area had been reduced, with marketing and sales expanded into the space. New faces looked at me with curiosity rather than recognition. The focused energy that had always characterized our workspace felt diluted, scattered. Margaret was in my office, on a video call when I entered. She wore a red designer dress that probably cost more than most employees made in a week. The office itself had been transformed with expensive art and sleek furniture that prioritized style over function. My minimalist workspace was unrecognizable. Her eyes widened when she saw me standing in the doorway. For a moment, genuine shock broke through her polished exterior. "I will call you back," she told whoever was on the screen, abruptly ending the call. Then her public face slid back into place. "Alexandra, this is such a wonderful surprise. The doctors told me you would be in rehabilitation for at least another month." She stood and came around the desk, arms outstretched for a hug that felt more like a performance for the employees gathering outside the glass walls of the office. I accepted it briefly before stepping back. "You look amazing," she continued, voice pitched to Carrie. "Such a miraculous recovery. Everyone has been so worried." "Have they?" I asked, my voice still rough from months of disuse. "Or have they been too busy with the new direction you have set for my company?" Her smile faltered slightly before recovering. "Your company?" "Our company." "You mean the company I saved while you were unable to lead it?" "We should discuss this privately." She moved to close the office door, shutting out the curious onlookers. Once we were alone, her demeanor shifted. The warmth receded from her eyes, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "You should be thanking me, Alexandra. SecureLink was floundering after your accident. The board had no succession plan. Clients were nervous. I stepped in and stabilized things. I took a seat in what used to be my chair, now replaced with something more throne-like. By shifting our focus away from enterprise security, by burning through cash reserves on marketing, by exploring a merger with Axiom that would essentially sell off our core technology." Her eyebrows rose. "You have been doing your homework for someone who just woke up from a coma. But you don't understand the market realities I have been dealing with. Your narrow approach was limiting our growth potential." I leaned forward. My narrow approach built a $50 million company with industry-leading technology and a 30% profit margin. Your broad approach has lost us 3 major clients and cut our research capacity in half. All while you enjoy your new wardrobe and corner office. Her expression hardened. The board appointed me acting CEO. All my decisions have been approved. And frankly, your outdated vision was holding SecureLink back. Sometimes fresh perspective is exactly what a company needs. Fresh perspective is valuable, I agreed. Dismantling what works to boost your ego is not. But we can let the results speak for themselves. Margaret laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. You snooze, you lose, Alexandra. Literally, in your case. I have been running this company for 6 months. The board trusts me now. The employees report to me. Even if you disagree with my strategy, you can't just walk back in and take over. I smiled, the expression calm despite the anger simmering beneath. Have you checked the safe yet? The safe? She asked, momentarily confused. You mean the company safe? Of course I have access to that. No, I said. My personal safe. The one containing records of every conversation where you discussed using SecureLink as your stepping stone. The one with documentation of your previous attempts to leverage your position as my sister to gain control. The one with the secondary patent filing that prevents you from selling our core technology without my explicit approval. Her face paled slightly. You are making this up. There is no such safe. I stood, my body protesting the movement, but my determination overriding the discomfort. Would you like to bet your new position on that? Or should we call an emergency board meeting right now to discuss everything I have discovered about your leadership during my absence? She straightened, gathering her composure. The board will support me. I have built relationships with them over these months. They understand my vision for the company. Do they understand that customer retention has dropped 20%? That our cash runway has shortened from 36 months to 11? That 3 of our senior developers have accepted offers from competitors? Facts that conveniently never made it into your board presentations? Margaret's confidence visibly wavered. Those are temporary setbacks during a transition period. Any major strategic shift comes with adjustment costs. I reached for the phone on the desk. Let's call Franklin and have him bring the contents of the safe to a board meeting this afternoon. Then we can let the directors decide who should lead SecureLink forward. You would not dare, she hissed, dropping all pretense of sisterly concern. This is about your ego, Alexandra. You cannot stand that I might be successful running your precious company. That I might actually improve on what you built. This is about protecting 10 years of work from someone who sees it as nothing but a shortcut to status and power, I replied. But you are right about one thing. I would prefer not to air our family disagreements in front of the board. So I am offering you a choice. What choice? She asked warily. You can resign as acting CEO today, citing my recovery and return. You keep the generous compensation you have received these 6 months. You transition back to a non-executive role, perhaps in marketing where your skills are actually valuable. And we never discuss what is in that safe. And the alternative? I activate the contingency plan. The board sees everything. The special provisions in the bylaws take effect. And your reputation in the tech industry becomes linked to this failed takeover attempt rather than any genuine accomplishment of your own. She stared at me, calculation and fury warring in her expression. You are bluffing. There is no safe. No contingency plan. In response, I pulled out my phone and dialed Franklin's number. Putting it on speaker. Franklin Bennett speaking, came his professional voice. Franklin, it is Alexandra Carter. I am in my office with Margaret. Please prepare to execute protocol safeguard immediately unless I call you back within the hour to cancel. There was a brief pause. Understood, Alexandra. The documents are ready for board distribution and the electronic notifications are queued. I will proceed at 3:15 unless I hear otherwise. I ended the call and looked at Margaret. 1 hour to decide. The color had drained from her face, but defiance still flashed in her eyes. This is blackmail. This is consequences, I corrected. Something you have skillfully avoided your entire life. The choice is yours, but I suggest you make it quickly. I have a company to rebuild. For several long moments, we stared at each other across the desk that had once been mine and would be again. In Margaret's eyes, I saw the little sister who had always expected to be rescued, to be given second chances, to charm her way out of accountability. But I also saw the moment she realized those tactics wouldn't work this time. Fine, she said finally. I will resign. But this is not over, Alexandra. For your sake, I hope it is, I replied. Because the safe contains copies, not originals. And Franklin has instructions if anything happens to me or to SecureLink in the future. She stood abruptly, gathering her designer purse. You always were paranoid about protecting your precious company. I guess I should have expected this level of backup planning. Not paranoid, I corrected. Just prepared. There is a difference. Margaret left the office without another word. I called Franklin to cancel Protocol Safeguard, then sat alone in the unfamiliar version of my office, contemplating the damage control that lay ahead and the complicated family dynamics that would never be the same again. The weeks following Margaret's resignation were both physically and emotionally exhausting. My body was still recovering from 6 months of inactivity, yet I needed to be visibly present and in control at SecureLink. The company required stabilization after Margaret's tenure, and the trust of employees and clients needed rebuilding. My first difficult decision involved whether to pursue legal action against my own sister. The evidence in the safe provided ample grounds for claims of breach of fiduciary duty and potentially even fraud in some of her financial reporting to the board. Franklin laid out the options dispassionately, as a good lawyer should. Legally, we have a strong case, he explained. But consider the practical and personal implications. A public legal battle between sisters would generate industry gossip that could harm SecureLink's reputation. It might also permanently destroy any possibility of reconciliation with Margaret. After 3 days of consideration, I chose not to press charges. Not out of sentimentality, but strategic calculation. The company needed focus on recovery, not distraction from legal proceedings. Instead, I had Franklin prepare a private settlement agreement that prohibited Margaret from working for competitors or discussing SecureLink's proprietary technology. 2 weeks after my return, I arranged to meet Margaret at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in a neighboring town where we were unlikely to encounter anyone from the industry. She arrived late, dressed expensively but more subdued than during her CEO days. Why did you ask to meet? She demanded before even sitting down. To gloat about how you outmaneuvered me? I gestured to the chair across from me. I asked you here to understand why. We grew up in the same house with the same parents. What made you see my life's work as something you could just appropriate? She laughed bitterly. You really don't get it, do you? You were always the smart one, the special one. Mom and Dad acted like your coding hobby was going to cure cancer, while my activities were just cute distractions. When you started SecureLink, suddenly everything was Alexandra built a company. Alexandra is so brilliant. Alexandra is changing the world. I listened as years of resentment poured out. How she felt overshadowed. How she perceived my successes as highlighting her failures. How she convinced herself that taking over SecureLink was just claiming the recognition she deserved all along. So you thought destroying what I built would somehow balance things? I asked when she finally paused. I wasn't destroying it, she insisted. I was making it bigger, more visible, more mainstream. Not everyone thinks like you, Alexandra. Most people don't care about elegant code or perfect encryption. They want products that look good and make them feel important. And that justifies lying to the board? Misrepresenting financials? Exploring a merger that would have essentially sold off our core technology? She had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. I got carried away with the power, with finally being the one in charge. But my intentions started out good. I really did want to save the company when you were in the coma. We talked for over 2 hours, excavating childhood memories and adult grievances. We did not reach complete understanding or forgiveness. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple resolution. But we achieved something like clarity about how we had arrived at this point. Back at SecureLink, the rebuilding process continued. I implemented significant changes, not because Margaret had been right about our direction, but because the experience had revealed vulnerabilities in our structure and culture. First, I addressed the leadership vacuum that had allowed the takeover to succeed. I promoted Ryan to Chief Operating Officer while retaining his security oversight. Patricia became a full executive vice president with expanded authority. I established a formal succession plan and emergency leadership protocol, approved by the board and understood by all executives. The company culture needed healing. Many employees felt confused or betrayed by the rapid changes under Margaret, then disoriented by her sudden departure. I initiated weekly town halls where nothing was off limits for discussion. Transparency became our renewed commitment, even when the news wasn't positive. Our technical focus returned to enterprise security, but with a more accessible user interface that incorporated some of Margaret's marketing insights without compromising our core strength. The consumer applications she had rushed into development were carefully evaluated. One showed genuine promise and was retained with proper engineering support. The others were gracefully discontinued. 3 clients who had left during Margaret's tenure agreed to return after I personally visited their headquarters to demonstrate our recommitment to security excellence. The development team, reinvigorated by renewed focus and respect, delivered our next-generation encryption protocol ahead of schedule. The most profound changes, however, were personal. The 6 months in darkness, followed by the betrayal and recovery, forced me to confront my own role in creating vulnerability. My workaholic tendencies had left me with few close relationships outside SecureLink. My identity had become so fused with the company that an injury to one was catastrophic to both. I began building a life beyond work. I reconnected with college friends long neglected. I accepted dinner invitations instead of sending apologetic cancellations. I even started dating Jason, an architect I met during physical therapy, who understood ambition but also valued balance. SecureLink itself became a healthier environment. I implemented genuine work-life balance policies, not just as employee benefits, but as cultural expectations. When our chief marketing officer Charlotte stayed at her desk until 9 at night 3 days running, I personally reminded her that sustained overwork led to diminished results, not greater achievement. 1 year after my return, SecureLink was stronger than before the accident. Our valuation had grown to $100 million. Our client retention rate exceeded 95%. Our team had expanded thoughtfully, with diversity of both demographics and thinking styles. Margaret and I established a cautious, limited relationship, monthly coffee meetings, occasional family gatherings where we maintained polite distance. She found a marketing position with a retail technology company, where her skills in presentation and promotion were valuable without the temptation of family connections to exploit. The safe remained where it was, its contents periodically updated but never needed. It represented a lesson about preparation without paranoia, about protecting what matters without being controlled by fear of loss. In quiet moments, I sometimes reflected on the strange gratitude I felt for that rainy night and the truck that ran the red light. Without that forced pause, I might never have discovered what was missing from my life beyond work. I might never have learned that a company built by one person but dependent on that same person is inherently fragile. The deepest lesson came from realizing that while Margaret's betrayal was wrong, my singular focus had created the conditions that made it possible. True security, both for a company and a person, comes from balanced strength distributed across multiple foundations, not from one brilliant but isolated pillar. Have you ever discovered that losing something temporarily helped you understand its true value? That a betrayal ultimately made you stronger? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Life has taught me that sometimes our greatest challenges reveal paths to deeper fulfillment. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setbacks can become setups for comebacks. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that sometimes what looks like the end is really just the beginning of something better.